Good morning, Paro, and we are so thrilled.
Hi, Rupa.
We are so thrilled to have this opportunity to be able to have a conversation with you. So welcome, and let me just say a little bit about you. There's just so much we can say about you. So I'm going to say that here we have a highly decorated writer of children's literature who's won the Sahitya Academy Award, and she's been invited to speak in numerous forums across the world, including the Harvard University and different countries, Germany and Singapore and UK and Sweden, and the list goes on and on. And one of your books, I believe, No Guns at My Son's Funeral, is also getting into, it's going to be made into a movie or it's going into cinema. Is all the best. So, okay, Paro. So, your book, A Quiet Girl, is the one that is part of the Valley of Words festival this year. And we were absolutely delighted to share this book with the children at the Latika Roy Foundation. And of course, they performed, and we'll be seeing a video of that. In fact, could we start this session with viewing the video of how the children have enjoyed your book?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
would.
okay? So, can we have the video, please? Thank you.
Once upon a time, there was a girl named Pooja. When she was born, her papa and mama were very happy. Pooja was a very peaceful baby. She never cried. She only smiled and smiled. She smiled at her family, her friends, and smiled at animals, especially a lot at horses. Because her parents worked with Bulbul, the white, beautiful mayor who lived in the Pooja's little home. Bulbul was very important in the wedding season. She carried the bridegroom to the wedding. It looked so grand. Mother, her parents realized that she was different from other children. When other children learned to sing, Mama Pooja would only smile and smile. Parents were worried, what if Pooja never learned to talk? All Pooja seemed to want was to spend time with her beloved Bulbul. Bulbul had a tiny foal. No one was happy. They had wanted a gold horse, but the new foal was a young male horse. Pooja was very happy. He loved the new little foal and he loved her too. Pooja, Papa and Mama decided that we must be sold. The day came for the little horse to go. Everyone was sad. The buyer took hold of the rope to lead the fool away. A loud voice cried, "Tug-bug, tug-bug." Everyone turned. This was Pooja's voice. Mama and Papa looked around, surprised. "Tug-bug, my tug-bug." She took the rope from the buyer. Pooja's mama had tears rolling down her cheeks. She rushed forward and took the rope from the buyer. Pooja began to talk. Pooja told her parents that she was ready to go to school now. Pooja rode Tug-bug to school and Tug-bug would pull a cord and earn money for his family, and they lived happily. Thank you.
She smiled at her family. She smiled at their friends. She smiled at feathers floating by, and she smiled at leaves falling from trees. But most of all, she smiled at animals, at birds on the rooftop, chickens in the coop, dogs on their daily walk. Thank you.
When Pooja was born, her mummy and papa were very happy. She always smiled and never cried.
जब पूजा का जन्म हुआ था उसके मम्मी पापा बहुत खुश थे।
वो कभी भी नहीं रोई, हमेशा हंसती रहती। आप सब कैसे हंसते हैं? हंस के दिखाइए। किसी को ले जा रहे थे, एकदम से पूजा चिल्लाई, टब्बक 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 टब्बक। तब अभी में किस काम आता है? दूल्हे को बिठाने के लिए, जिससे दूल्हा उसके ऊपर बैठ जाए। People used to dance in front of Bulbul. When she got tired, Papa used to feed her good and carrots. जब बुलबुल थक जाती थी तो पापा उसे गुड़ और गाजर खिलाते थे। गुड़ और गाजर का स्वाद कैसा होता है? गुड़ का स्वाद बहुत मीठा होता है और गाजर का स्वाद भी बहुत मीठा होता है। कैसे? When Pooja was born, her papa and mama were very happy. Pooja was very peaceful baby. She never cried, she never fussed. She only smiled and smiled and smiled. She smiled at the family, she smiled at their friends, she smiled at feathers flatting by the, she smiled at leaves flatting from trees. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I really want to share this award with Taposhi Ghoshal, the illustrator of the book. And I mean, really, she sort of went inside my head. I haven't met her for years, but she went inside my head. She saw the images, the sort of how I had pictured it, and she absolutely translated it. Also, want to share the award with Shayoni Basu of Duckbill. Because Duckbill brings out the most extraordinary books for children. They've taken such leaps in the world of children's literature, and I've been writing for young adults for a long time. I write long works, novels, and as you had mentioned, No Guns at My Son's Funeral. And um, so when she came to me with this idea of writing a chapter book, it was quite a challenge for me. Uh, I didn't know how. I have written shorter books. I've written some books. I was on a fellowship. I brought out a book called Babies in My Heart, and in Hindi it's called Dil Mein Bachcha Hai Ji. It's a dual language book. And the other one is called Ruru, which is about little frightened kangaroo. And Babies in My Heart is about different kinds of families, and everything can be a family. Anybody can be a family, a single parent family, a joint family with lots of members, a two father family, a two mother family, anything, I mean, triplets and twins and everything makes a family. So that's what that one is about. But still, it was a challenge when Shayani asked me to do A Quiet Girl. It had been, I had never written a chapter book before. I'd read them, enjoyed them, and I understood why a chapter book is so important. It's that a newly confident reader, as we saw, reading the book and having the thrill of having read a full book themselves. That's why a chapter. And then you get a whole story, but yet it's not just a short story. So yeah, it was important, and they were launching this new imprint called Hook Books, and it was one of the few times, I have to say, in life that I was actually rejected. Some story of mine was rejected because there was something that I wrote and they said no. Shani said no, and then something else I wrote and she said no. And I'm so glad that she pushed me to do better, and she obviously did better because here we are today. And the quiet girl has made a loud noise and won an award.
Absolutely. Are you able to hear me now, Paro? Okay,
Yes.
great. So we know that you can't stop writing, and you write quite a range of literature for children, like from picture books to literature for young adults. So, how do you manage that? Please tell us. How does that happen? That you have such
Rupa, really, yeah, really, it happens from the gut. When I start writing, I don't think of, okay, I'm going to write this, except, something where I've been given a brief. But otherwise, if I'm just writing on my own, there's an idea, a title, an image, a sound, a smell that I want to translate into a story. And I just jump into the deep end, not thinking how long the pool is and how deep the water is. I just literally jump in and start writing. And the book kind of finds its level. The story finds its level. And somewhere along the way, I know that this is going to be for young adults or for little kids. Is it going to be a short story? Is it going to be a novel? Sometimes there is a novel sitting inside a short story. There is something that I wrote for Penguin actually, a story called A Ruined Holiday. They were doing holiday stories, and I wrote a story called A Ruined Holiday. And I realized, after I'd written it, the editor said, she said, I really want to know more. And I thought, yeah, this could be a novel. But in fact, I've written it as a short story. Maybe sometime I'll go on. So, Rupa, honestly, it's a long winded answer, but the short answer is that I just jump in and start writing. And somewhere the story finds some a branch to roost on, let's say.
The idea is there, and then along the way, it takes shape, and then you figure out whether it's going to be a picture book or for young adults. Great.
That's right.
Paro, we have also heard about your experience of creating the longest newspaper with children. So please share that experience with us.
It was most exciting. It was such a wonderful project. We were actually, I was working in the National Book Trust, heading the National Center for Children's Literature. And our brief was to go into the smallest villages. We were working with an NGO in Rajasthan. So we were going into little dhanis, like little um, the small, you can't even call it a village. It was just a group of hamlets. And setting up libraries there, training on how to set up library, how to run a library. And we were giving this box of about 100 books as a gift to start off. And we were sort of patting ourselves on our back and saying, good job, well done. And then one night in Bikaner, I think it was, as we were wrapping up and leaving, and we had this bus of books and all of that, this one girl came to me and she said, देखिए, हम अंधकार में रह रहे थे, हमें पता ही नहीं था कि एक किताबों की दुनिया है। कि हम खुश थे, हमें पता ही नहीं था, तो हम बिल्कुल ठीक थे। लेकिन अब आपने एक नई दुनिया हमें दिखाई है, किताबों की दुनिया। ये पतली-पतली किताबें तो हम झट से पढ़ लेंगे। उस अब हम वापस उस अंधकार में खुश नहीं रह सकते, और किताबें कहाँ से आएँगी? There were no bookstores, of course there are no libraries. nowhere for these children to access any more books. And obviously, we couldn't go on donating free books to the same places. It was a huge project. So that night, I couldn't sleep. And at about 4 in the morning, got together with my team and we were thinking, what should we do? And that's when we collectively realized that the best resource is actually children themselves. They have stories to tell. And so we said, okay, let them write. Let's get them to do their writing. So that's what we did that day, get them to do their writing. It was a revelation because it was for the very first time that these children were given a moment of childhood, really, and allowed to express their views, their wants, say what they wanted to say. It was the first time that they had a platform. And we realized that, gosh, this is a bigger thing than we thought. And so we went around the country to 11 states uh, in 13 Indian languages across about a year, or over a year. And the newspaper was contributed to with about 3,000 children. As I said, 13 languages. And it was 825 meters long. And in some places, it would the children actually kept up with that. It was a very powerful place for them. Sometimes when they didn't like something that was going on, they couldn't speak about it. They could write it anonymously on that wall. So it was a wall newspaper on old cloth, old saris, and it really empowered children to speak up. So it was a very powerful, and I was so proud of this project. One of the sort of highlights of my life.
To get the children to express whatever they have to say and yet get them to writing as well. Spara, also in your literature for young adults, we see glimpses of children growing up in very difficult times. And you do have all this in the backdrop of a political backdrop, though you show us all these things from the eyes of a child, no guns at my son's funeral, the weed, nomad's land. So how do you do this? Please share this with us.
I work a lot with children and I try and spend as much time as I can with children in difficult circumstances. Um, because they are really so disenfranchised and they have no voice. So I try and empower them by getting them to speak up and also um, be their voice to a larger world because I have that access, which maybe they don't. Um, when researching for No Guns at My Son's Funeral, uh, that came out of a time when I saw a young boy who I was working with. He was about 12, very naughty, the kind of kid who teachers say, oh God, we have to go to this child's class. He disappeared and we don't know where he went. We couldn't trace him. He wasn't at home. It's very likely that he was picked up by a militant outfit. I've seen some of this happening, out of the window of my hotel. Some vulnerable child gets picked up, and they become sort of. It's exciting. You must understand that these children are very bored. There are curfews, schools are closed, they're not allowed out, there's so much scrutiny. And so, if somebody says that, look, I'll give you money, go and do this, or do you want to learn how to fire a gun? Do you want to learn how to do this? Children need something to do, simple as that. So, there are young boys and girls who have gone into that. While researching No Guns at My Son's Funeral, I also found another horrible thing of half orphans and half widows. That is, families of those who had disappeared, of the men who had disappeared, and we don't know which side they disappeared to. And this thing of half widow and half orphan really incensed me because I felt these are, you're giving them half an identity and they're falling between cracks. And the half orphans and half widows were not being given any support by the government or by any of the NGOs at that time that I knew of. That's what my research revealed. And so weed came out of my research of No Guns at My Son's Funeral. When I was reading from those two books at a particular venue, I think in Bangalore, a young girl stood up and she said, "Ma'am, you only write about boys and you only write about the Kashmiri Muslim story. What about the Kashmiri Pandits who were driven out?" And I thought, yeah, I want to write that story. So I started researching that. And of course, in my research, I found it was a Kashmiri Pandit story, which is a painful and dastardly story of what has happened with them. But there are so many more worldwide. The Syrian refugees, the Rohingyas, so many, time and time, the Tibetans. And so the idea started forming of two stories running parallelly and then meeting. Two similar and yet dissimilar stories, which then meet up. And I couldn't find the second story exactly what I wanted. I was sitting at my mother's deathbed, and her breath was struggling on, and her body was really gone, her mind had gone. And I thought, I wish there was a way in which I could wrap up these remaining breaths that she has and release her. And that's where the idea of the breathtaking came from, which then led me to make up a tribe of people who had been driven out, who had become refugees, forced refugees. Um, and I made up a tribe called the Kushavans, and that became the second parallel story to the Kashmiri Pandit girl. So really, kind of these three, without realizing it, I wrote a trilogy, which kind of telescope one into the other. And it's interesting because they become slightly bigger and bigger in their canvas. As that maybe there's another one waiting, I don't know yet. Something like Being Gandhi, that story I was asked to do by HarperCollins, and my first reaction was no, I don't want to do it because children are dead bored of Gandhi. What more is there to say about Gandhi? We've said it all, and we've kind of dried him up and stuck him into currency notes and textbooks, and children aren't interested anymore. And the editor at HarperCollins, who's a friend, said, "Yeah, but we want you to write a story on Gandhi, such as one that has not been written." And so I jumped in thinking that it would be a story for young children. But actually, I realized that there had been this wound in me that I hadn't been able to bring out as a story. And so I brought the narrative up to 1984, the assassination and anti Sikh riots of 1984, and placed the book there, the story there, and the child there. So it's not about Gandhi, it's about finding the Gandhi within you. And yet it is a book on the Gandhian way. Yeah. So different ways. I mean, as I say, that the stories find me really. I don't chase them mostly; they find me.
Last question from us, and then we have a couple of questions from children who've read your books. So, this one we definitely need to know. I mean, not all authors are storytellers, and certainly not all storytellers are authors. How do you do this fascinating thing together?
I love both, actually. I'm a performer. I've been an actress since I was very young. And just being in that space of acting where you literally are living in someone else's skin and you become that person. And unless you become that person, it's not authentic on stage. Similarly, it's not authentic in a book either. And so, really, I'm wearing the performer's hat while writing, and I'm wearing the writer's hat while performing. So, if I'm stuck somewhere, I read it out. I stand in front of a mirror, I act it out, and I kind of wrench it out. And sometimes when I'm working in an office, one of those glass paneled offices, people are kind of looking at me and wondering what's happening. I write in traffic jams. I love traffic jams. So I write in the back seat of my car. And sometimes when I'm sort of grimacing and doing things, or I'm sitting at an airport waiting for my flight, and I see somebody little staring at me, kind of quizzically saying, Bichari, she's lost it, which I have. I've
Book in your
lost
head,
myself
yeah.
and become someone else.
So we have two questions to Paro ma'am. There's Moksh Rai who says, Paro ma'am, I like this book, The Quiet Girl, because some of the children in Latika Vihar, Latika Roy Foundation, they are like Pooja, they cannot speak. I know it because I go to Latika Vihar. Where did you get the idea to put in a child who cannot speak?
Could I have the name of the person who asked?
Miss Moksh Rai.
Moksha.
Moksh, yeah.
So, Moksha, that's a great question. And I actually got the idea from the opposite place. I was watching TV. I was watching a panel discussion on the television news, and everyone was shouting. And then there was this moment of silence. Nobody had anything to say because they were just shouting to be heard. No one was listening, and no one really had something important and moving to say. It was just noise. And I thought of a girl who was quiet, who only spoke when she really needed to speak up. Then she spoke up. Until then, there was nothing to say. Why keep saying your one, two, threes and ABCs and I want, and ye dekho, wo dekho, ye dikhao, ye chahiye. Kyun? She didn't need to do any of that. When she needed, she found her voice and she spoke up.
And the next question is from Lakshmi Bhandari saying, Ma'am, there are lots of pictures in this book, and the clothes of the people and the child are like villagers. Did you go into a village? Because there's also a bus and a cycle in the pictures. So, did that village have the bus and the cycle? And I think mainly is, did you go to the village to write that book?
I set the story in a village, really, in my mind. This is what I meant, like at the beginning, that Tapushi went into my head. I didn't give her a brief, but she went into my head and saw a village there. And it's kind of a Himachal village, a Pahari village, which is the kind of village that I love, the kind of village where I stay in summer, where I have a home. So, I think it's important to um, also place stories where stories aren't often placed. So wherever that place is. Did I go into the village? Many villages. This particular village, no. Did Taposhi go into the village to illustrate these? I don't know. But that we'll have to ask her. And I really would really want to share the award with her. It's totally 50-50 for the two of us. You know.
Thank you very much, Paro. It was just wonderful talking to you, and we look forward to many more titles coming and we connecting with you again and again with lots more awards. So
Thank
Thank
you
you very
so
much.
much. I'm working on a very challenging book right now. Um, it's got a tiger and a tribal girl as the main protagonists. It's very challenging, and I have to think about how I'm going to overcome those challenges.
Waiting now.
So wish me luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Paro.
you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.